What's up, guys? So, I've got a bit of a problem. You guys remember the Sega Genesis CD and 32X video that I did last year? I'll put a card up here too in case you didn't see it. One of the biggest gripes I have about that system is actually the setup of it. And while the console, or should I say consoles, will stay together for the most part once you're done, once you put this guy away though, you still have to deal with the mess of cables that it takes to actually hook this guy up. And one of the biggest problems with actually wanting to play the Tower of Power here is the power supplies. Because not only do you have to power the Genesis, you have to power the CD and you have to power the 32X all separately. And you know, that in and of itself isn't that bad, but the biggest issue with it is the Genesis requires a brick style power supply. The 32X requires a brick style power supply. And the CD also requires a brick style power supply. Now obviously you're gonna need a power strip to get this guy up and running because the standard wall outlet is only 2 plugs, but with the sheer size of these guys, they don't play nice on power strips either. You have to have one on one end and one on the other, and then that covers up all of the ones in the middle that you could use for the third one. So I knew there had to be something. I knew there had to be some kind of product that would make this less of a hassle. And I think I found it. What's in this box is a power supply that should be able to power all three, the Genesis, the Sega CD, and the 32X, all with one wall plug. Now that sounds almost too good to be true, so I had to get it, I had to try it, and I wanted to share it with you guys. So I'll bring you guys over to the table, we'll unbox this guy and show you what all comes with it, because there are a few pieces in here that it's important to know about, and then we'll actually test it out on my Tower of Power here to make sure that nothing goes wrong. All right, so come on over, let's do it. Alrighty. Here we go. Now, yes, this power supply did just come in this unassuming white box. There's no real markings on it. There's no real big branding on it or anything. It is just a power supply for the Sega Genesis CD 32X. And just to give you an idea of why this is kind of important, the struggle with playing the Tower of Power is the power supplies, because you have 1, 2, 3. 3 power supplies that are basically the same size as this box here. So you've got to find a place to plug in all 3 of these in order to be able to play your Sega Genesis CD 32X. You could get away with having just the Genesis CD plugged in or just the Genesis 32X plugged in for the most part, but if you're wanting to play one of those few games that required all 3, you got to manage this. And that's where this guy comes in. So let's just dive in and we'll show you what comes in the box. There we go. So inside the box, you get the actual power supply itself, a decently stout wall cable, and I guess you would call this a splitter that actually takes the power supply, the single plug from the power supply, and splits it out to where it can power all of the devices at one time. The reason it has so many is because this thing's actually designed to handle any combination of the Tower of Power that you could own. That's split into 2 little plugs and 2, I guess I'll call them medium plugs because there's a bigger plug, but we'll talk about that in a second. One of your little plugs is for the 32X. The other little plug is for a Model 2 Sega Genesis. And these 2 big plugs are for your Sega CD, Model 1 or Model 2, and your Model 1 Sega Genesis. The interesting thing here though is that this thing actually does come with a 5th plug, which is objectively the biggest of the 3, as you can see here. This big guy here is actually for powering the Super Nintendo. You can have both the Tower of Power and the Super Nintendo set up next to each other, and all of them plugged in running off of one plug. Now, I don't know too much about electrical stuff. I'll let this hold up on the screen for a few seconds so that way you can take a look at it and get a feel for the actual specs of this power brick. Given the nature of this thing and how it seemed kind of, how the listing made it seem a little janky, for lack of a better word, this power brick's actually a bit more well-made than I expected. It does have a little bit of give to it, but I expected this plastic to be a lot thinner than it is, and it doesn't feel like obviously you don't want to like step on it or anything, but it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel any kind of fragile, you know? And as far as plugging everything together, all the connections do feel very solid. It doesn't feel like either of these connections are going to come loose at any given time. But the whole purpose of getting something like this is this end here. It is just a single US outlet end. This could fit into a power strip easily and not block any of the other ports, or this could fit into your wall outlet and have no issue whatsoever. The whole purpose of something like this is to minimize your space in the wall. You take this one plug here to power all three, technically 4 systems, and compare it to how much space it would actually take up to power all of them, and add one more for the Super Nintendo. That's the reason for something like this. All right, just to give proof that this thing actually does work, I've got the only Sega CD32X game that I own, Fahrenheit, and we're going to plug this guy in and show you it working. So we're gonna start with the initial disc. So there is the Sega CD part working. Please press start and insert disc 2. And then there's the 32X CD disc. Drop that guy in and let it go. And there we go. It is indeed working. And just for kicks and giggles, I have the Sega CD 32X still running, Fahrenheit still playing on the TV. I went ahead and plugged the Super Nintendo into it as well, using like the bigger cable that was on the splitter. As you can see, Super Nintendo is on. And if I change the cables over, Super Nintendo is working as well. So if you're wanting proof that it does indeed work with both of them and that it can drive both of them at the same time, there you go. Now, some people did have some negative things to say about it in the storefronts, but I did not experience those myself. And I could totally understand this being a little too expensive, given that this is currently sitting at $37 when you can get just a couple of power strips for a lot cheaper than that. But this filled a niche in my collection, and I would say I recommend it if you have the need for something like this. But what do you guys think? Is this something you would buy? Do you have a need for something like this? I know I did, but I want to hear from you guys. Post it down in the comments. Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear from you. But that's going to be it for me. Thank you guys for being here, and I look forward to bringing you even more hardware reviews just like this one as the days go on. So again, thank you guys for being here, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one, y'all.